I just talked to my CPA and he confirmed this completely legal tax strategy that lets you make private school tuition tax deductible. Here's a 3-step framework that you can follow. Step number 1 is to hire your kids for your business. They can help organize the office, they can help clean the office, and they're gonna learn real business skills. Step number 2 is to structure their pay. In 2025, you can pay them up to $14,600. They're not gonna owe any income taxes, and you can deduct that same amount as a business expense. And step number 3, the money they earn can be used for anything, including private school tuition. Even though private school isn't normally tax deductible, you just created a legal way to write it off through your business.
I can already see it now. People jumping in the comments saying, Edward, you can't deduct private school. Absolutely. That concept of deducting private school, no, you can't do that. However, what's being talked about in this particular post is a methodology that accomplishes a very, very similar outcome, right? Utilizing pre-tax dollars to pay for private school is essentially the same as deducting private school. And that's what's being talked about. Like if you are a business owner that has a minor child, you can compensate that minor child for actual services rendered to your business and then utilize the funds that you gave to that minor child to pay for the private school tuition. So in essence, getting a tax deduction for the tuition, right? Because you're getting a tax deduction at the business level for the compensation you pay to that minor child. And so long as the amount that that minor child receives is at or below the standard deduction threshold, the money they receive is tax-free to them. This is called an income shifting strategy. You're shifting income from your tax bracket to your child's tax bracket, which is hopefully zero, if not close to zero. Now, here's the thing that's important to note. The biggest pushback I tend to get when I talk about this strategy on social media is that you can't hire children, right? Like child labor laws and things of that nature. Well, in reality, when we're talking about family businesses at the federal level, there's no issues really from a child labor law standpoint. It's not applicable, with the exception, obviously, that the type of job duties that child is engaging in can't be hazardous, right? They have to be safe, and they also have to be age appropriate. You wouldn't have your 3-year-old driving a delivery truck for your business, as an example. So it has to be age appropriate type of work, and so long as it's safe and you're adhering to the traditional standards of caring for the people you love and care about, you're not going to put them in danger. You're going to be fine. Different states have different rules that you have to adhere to too, but in the vast majority of circumstances, there are ways and methodologies by which you can still comply with the law of your respective state and compensate your child for services rendered to your business. The very easy example is the concept of having your child model for your business, right? Like be appearing in marketing material through photography or videography on your social media accounts and things of that nature, because you can compensate your child so long as it's appropriate to do so and have your child participate in that type of activity for your business. But you can pay them based on traditional, like, model rates, right? Like the Screen Actors Guild has a whole series of scenarios by which they determine what is a reasonable amount of compensation to be paid for actual actors and talent, if you will, in that regard. So it's absolutely legitimate to be able to compensate your child in a similar fashion. Now, what's happening is the business is getting a deduction for the compensation being paid to the child, and the child is receiving that income at their tax bracket, which in the vast majority of cases is going to be zero. And I do want to correct one comment here. It's just a minor slip. The standard deduction in 2025 is actually $15,000. So you could, at least on a federal level, contribute up to or pay up to $15,000 to your minor child and get a deduction at the business level, and the child can receive it federally income tax free. But it's important to note that different states don't necessarily adhere to the federal standard deduction amount, right? You want to be sure to understand what levels your state has with regard to the taxability, if you will, of certain amounts of income. And again, you want to make sure that the compensation you'd be giving is age appropriate and appropriate for the type of services actually being rendered to your business by your minor child. Now, what is a minor child? Well, in the context of what we're talking about here, it is a child aged 17 years or younger. And so long as that's the case, the compensation under the right business structures can be paid without any withholding whatsoever. Withholding for income taxes, withholding for Social Security, Medicare, unemployment, right? No withholding whatsoever. But again, it's important to note you need the right business structure for that to happen. As an example of a business structure you could not do that in would be an S corporation. meaning you wouldn't necessarily want to hire your child inside of your S corporation and compensate them there, because an S corporation would require you to do those types of withholdings, right? It's just the nature of the corporation itself. However, you could establish a limited liability company outside of your S corporation if you had one, and pay that limited liability company for the services your child renders to you through that entity. And so long as the members of the limited liability company are the parents, meaning there's no non-parent member of the limited liability company, you get to pay them without any withholdings whatsoever. Now, again, how to utilize those funds? Well, those funds could be utilized to pay for private school, which again is the tantamount, if you will, of getting the deduction for private school. That's why this post, we get pushback when similar things happen and the discussions are had, because the private school itself is actually not tax deductible, but you're essentially getting that same outcome with a strategy like this. Now, when you're trying to figure out which strategies make the most sense for you, you want to really dive deep into figuring out how a strategy is applicable in your circumstance, whether or not it's worth the effort and energy to do so, and then again, figuring out how to actually implement that on a day-to-day basis. Because you want to make sure that when you're compensating your child, as an example, you don't want to necessarily wait until the end of the year to compensate the child for something they did in February or March, right? You want the compensation to be relatively contemporaneous with the service actually being rendered. So figuring out the right payment schedule and the right payment amounts, these are all things that you would engage with an advisor, someone who is actually aware, a strategist who can help you navigate and determine which strategies to employ and at what levels. Now, all of this is being said and shared within the context of giving you general education. But in order to get specialized information that you can use to take action, you're going to want to talk with someone who actually knows what they're doing and can learn more about your circumstance to give you that nuanced counsel. Now, I have no idea whether or not we'd be a fit for doing that. But what I do know is that you can just click the link in the description below and find out for yourself. Go through a quick assessment, figure out whether or not we'd be a fit to add value. And if so, then we'd have a conversation to see if it makes sense to move forward. Regardless, I wish you well in your journey. Bye for now.